Jam Butty Boy is the reluctant fell runner. Chapter 9. The formation of the Lungsdale Fell Runners Association. JB parked up at the community centre car park. There was a handmade banner over the open doors. The Lungsdale Fell Runners Association. Inside the hall, Yorkshire and Three Coats were behind a table with piles of different coloured A4 sheets of paper.
"Welcome, welcome, Jam Butty Boy,"
said Yorkshire, rubbing his hands together. He looked beside himself with excitement. Three Coats saw JB, folded his arms and stepped back. JB looked around. There were chairs set out, a projector and screen set up. Camo was there, and a few fellow fell runners. He recognised most of them. "Hi, Yorkshire," said JB. "This looks organised." Yorkshire took the compliment with pride.
"We aim to be the fittest, most organised and eventually most decorated fell running club in the country," he said.
"Nice," said JB.
"Right, let's get you organised,"
said Yorkshire. He picked up the first coloured sheet.
"Here is your kit list,"
he said, handing it to him. "Thanks," said JB. Then he did the rest one by one.
"Here is the list of the annual races, a list of helpful websites, a dietary advice sheet, first aid."
JB got to the end of the table with 8 different sheets, each of different colours. "Thanks," he said.
"Oh, and as a welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Lungsdale Fell Running Association, here's a pen,"
said Yorkshire. He handed JB a pen. It was a cheap biro with Lungsdale Fell Runners embossed in gold. "Oh, nice," said JB. Yorkshire beamed so happy he had no words and just said,
"Pa!"
"So, no rat's tails required then?" said JB.
"Ah, well, no. Put that down to the folly of youth,"
said Yorkshire. "Is he not speaking to me?" said JB, nodding at Three Coats.
"You bent his pole,"
said Yorkshire.
"You put a ding in it. No one likes a kink in their pole. Makes it weaker, and it's unsightly."
"Well, he poked me in the bum with his pole, and at the most indiscreet moment," said JB. "I was 3,000 feet up Hell's Fell, hanging over a bloody precipice at the time." Yorkshire shuddered.
"I'm not keen on heights,"
he said.
"Three Coats,"
Yorkshire shouted.
"Come on, man, stop sulking there. Write JB out his membership card. Let's forgive and forget."
Three Coats flopped his arms about and banged a card on the table to fill it out.
"I'm number 1, of course,"
said Yorkshire proudly.
"I'm number 2,
said Three Coats, showing off to JB. "You're a number 2, said JB.
"Yes, I'm a number 2,
said Three Coats.
"Yorkshire wanted a number 1, and he's waited such a long time for it. He was desperate, really. When he finally had his number 1, he was so relieved."
"Well, I think you deserve a number 2 after all your efforts," said JB.
"Thanks,"
said Three Coats.
"That means a lot."
He passed over JB's card. "What number did I get?" he said.
"Oh, they just went in order of appearance after Yorkshire. Me and Camo. You'll just get a random number,"
said Three Coats, trying to get one up on him. "I don't mind," said JB.
You're a 7,
said Three Coats, passing his card over. JB looked at his card. It said Jam Butty 007. "Oh, look at that," said JB, holding his hands out in an imaginary gun, pointing at Three Coats. 007! The name's Butty, Jam Butty. Licence to thrill, on the hill. He showed the number to Three Coats, who pulled his face.
"I don't know,"
said Three Coats.
If you fell off the co-op, you'd land on the divvy.
What does that mean? Said JB.
I don't know,
Said Three Coats.
my grandfather used to say it if someone got lucky.
Oh, said JB.
You have to go over to Camo next,
he said. JB walked towards Camo while Three Coats went to Yorkshire.
I should have taken more time picking my number,
said Three Coats quietly.
I would have liked to have been 007. 007 Brian.
No, you're a number 2, said Yorkshire. Definitely a number 2. Camo was stood next to a set of scales with a clipboard, looking like a sergeant major. Hi, Camo, said JB. He was just about to joke about the seriousness and all the leaflets he'd been given.
Hi, Jam Butty,
he said with a serious voice. Oh no, he's the same, thought JB.
Jam Butty,
Camo repeated, writing his name on the list.
Pop on the scales.
What? Said JB.
Step on the scales,
he said formally.
We will track your weight once a month and give you a target weight to aim for and a peak condition weight. It's all very scientific.
JB was shocked, but found himself automatically standing on the scales.
Ooh,
Camo sucked in a breath.
11 stone, 8 pounds. Tut, tut, tut. OK, let's check your target weight against your height.
He flicked out a rolled up tape measure with a dramatic flick and bent down to JB's feet.
Lift up your foot,
said Camo. JB automatically lifted up his foot.
Put your foot down gently and don't smash my fingers. Already had that once tonight.
JB slowly lowered his foot. Camo stood up, the satisfying noise of the tape measure running through his fingers.
Love that sound,
he said.
Right, Jam Butty, stand still.
He held the tape up, put one of his hands flat on the top of JB's head and squinted one eye.
I'll be generous and say about 5'7",
he said.
Lift your foot.
JB released the end of the tape from under his foot, and Camo expertly and quickly made it into a firm round disc and popped it into his pocket. He went to his chart, wrote the height down, and then did some mental counting.
I thought so,
he said, talking to him like an impersonal doctor, not a friend.
You're carrying too much timber. Your ideal weight for your height would be 10 stone, 2 pounds, but that might be difficult to achieve quickly. You need to aim for 10.5 stone.
OK, he said, unsure.
Oh, don't worry. We'll get you sorted. Did you get your diet sheets from Yorkshire?
JB held them up.
Good,
said Camo.
Pull up a chair for the presentation.
JB turned around a little shocked with it all. Melanie came walking across with a handful of sheets and the same look on her face.
What's all this?
She said, holding up the leaflets.
This is a bit OTT, isn't it?
You've seen nothing yet, smiled JB, seeing Camo coming towards her.
What do you mean?
She said.
Ah, Melanie,
said Camo.
Could you pop over onto these scales to get yourself weighed?
Excuse me?
She said.
To get weighed,
he repeated.
It's for your training. We need to weigh you, take your height and give you a target weight to aim for.
Bugger off, she said. Camo was surprised.
Oh, but Yorkshire wants...
Melanie gave him an ice stare.
Oh, yes, quite,
said Camo.
I'm sure you're fine.
Camo backed away.
Target weight,
said Melanie to JB, who shrugged.
It's taken me half an hour to get here. and I get given a set of weighing scales to stand on. It should be a nice cup of tea and a biscuit. And I'm bursting for the loo.
JB smiled. I've not seen any tea, but there's toilets at the back.
Thanks, she said. I hear there's a presentation next. Save me a seat next to you, will you?
OK, he said. She set off for the toilets and he went over to Camo. There's no tea and coffee, is there? He said.
No,
said Camo, scratching beneath his shirt.
Everyone's asking. It's the one thing me and Yorkshire forgot. Dagnammit. I hope it doesn't put people off. We'll sort it out for next time.
What's up? Said JB.
Oh, there is one problem with this shaving all your body hair I've found,
said Camo. What's that? Said JB.
Well, your hair grows back and it's so goddamned itchy when it comes through. When you shave, you cut through the thick base of the hair, don't you? As it comes through as a thick hair with a sharp cut edge. It bloody itches everywhere, he said, putting his hand inside his hurt and scratching his chest, and then down his back and scratching there. Ugh, he said, scratching really fast.
Oh, don't do that, said JB. If you break your skin, you'll regret it.
Don't care,
said Camo.
It's driving me mad. Worse than mozzies in the bloody jungle, this.
So, are you going to keep it up or knock it on the head? Said JB. Camo was so busy scratching, he did not hear what JB said.
What?
He said. Are you going to carry on shaving your body or stop doing it?
Don't know yet,
said Camo, scratching.
I really liked it when I did it, but I don't like this itching phase. And I don't know if I can be bothered keeping it up every few days or once a week or whatever it will take. I don't think my wife is going to be wanting to be shaving me back once a week.
That man there,
shouted Yorkshire, pointing at Camo.
What's up with you, man? Scratching. Have you got fleas or something? Get that dog of yours to the vet's.
Mosquitoes, shouted JB.
Oh?
Said Yorkshire, looking about him, confused. Yorkshire moved to in front of the screen. He had a big, excited, religious grin, and he was holding his hands tightly.
Right then. Actually, I'm quite nervous now, surprisingly. This has been a long-held dream of mine, that through friends and...
Get on with it,
shouted a friendly voice.
Yes,
beamed Yorkshire.
Some of you have come a long way, so welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Lungsdale Fell Runners.
Everyone clapped.
Hooray!
Went up the shout. Three Coats rattled a chair.
Don't do that, you'll scratch the floor.
Yorkshire snapped at him.
Oh, sorry, just got a bit excited there,
said Three Coats.
Yes, we all are,
said Yorkshire.
But we're not barbarians.
Melanie snuck in and sat down quietly next to JB.
Have I missed anything?
She said. There'll be tea and coffee next time, said JB.
Good.
Half an hour later, the presentation was still going on. The heating was on full blast, and gradually everyone, except Camo and Yorkshire doing the presentation enthusiastically, were getting sleepy. Not that they noticed. JB could feel himself drifting off, with the occasional sentence registering spasmodically.
Your membership form, personal training schedule, winter kit and summer kit list. OK,
said Yorkshire.
The big reveal that I have been waiting so long for.
JB heard the big reveal and forced himself to listen.
Every successful organisation has a specialism,
said Yorkshire in his quasi-religious intonation.
A point of difference, a unique selling point. And now we come to ours, our own unique cri de coeur. In martial arts, you have different coloured belts for different levels of skills or achievement or ability. We are going to appropriate that idea, but for fell running. For different standards of achievement, Lungsdale Fell Runners will be awarded different graded neck gaiters or buffs. Beginners and new members will start off with white neck gaiters and on through the colours up to black. Only those fell runners who have completed the ultimate challenge, the Norbert round, within 24 hours will be able to wear a coveted black neck gaiter. If you look at the slide on the screen, you can see the progression through. So white for beginners, yellow if you can achieve Old Duffer Pike Peak in under 30 minutes, orange.
Yorkshire talked on through light green, dark green, blue, light brown, dark brown, and finally the coveted black buff.
That puts me about dark green,
JB was thinking.
OK, I will now hand you over to my friend and colleague Camo to talk you through this year's schedule of events.
This is dragging on a bit, whispered Melanie in a bored and frustrated voice. I could have been actually running instead. JB had an idea. He took one of the sheets and tore a strip of paper off, and using the new Lungsdale Fell Running pen, wrote something on it, folded it up so that it could not be seen. He saw she was watching him. He put his hand down out of sight to pass it to her. She sneakily put her hand down and took it from him. She brought it up onto her lap, unfolded it and glanced down. He had written the word boo. She sniggered quietly. With slow movements so as not to be noticed, she found her own pen, surreptitiously wrote something on the paper and slipped it back to him. He looked around to see no one was looking, opened the note and read, "Ha ha. Thanks for waking me up. Falling asleep here." The note was full, so he tore off another slip, and someone near him looked around at the noise. He stared ahead as if it wasn't him. When the person looked back, he started writing and slipped her the note. She glanced at it and had a loud snigger. "Hoo-hoo," he had written. Not the most interesting way of sleeping together. A few people looked. She waited for them to look away. When they all stopped looking, she turned the note over and quickly wrote, folded it and handed it to him. "Make it stop and I'll show you my tits," it said. JB grunted and squelched a noise. Everyone looked around. He pretended to be coughing and then got it under control. Melanie sat, innocent-faced. "Excuse me, sorry, Camo," he said. Camo coughed himself and started again.
If we turn left at the collapse in the fence, watch out if the clag is down. You don't want to miss it. If you carry on ahead willy-nilly, you could get lost. And you could die!
When everyone was looking away, JB wrote her a note, folded it over and passed it back. She opened it. "Not worth it," he'd written. She changed her position and gave him a little kick in the ankle, just enough to give a sharp pain. "Ooh!" JB had a flashback memory to the girls at school in the playground. A picture came to him. The girls would form a linked chain and walk around saying, "Anybody want a show?" in a sing-song fashion. If you said yes, they would do something simple and daft, like wiggle their hips and then giggle and run off. Or they would stand there, suddenly nervous, saying, You do it, you do it," to each other. He remembered the chains sometimes becoming really long, and the end person being spun around and sometimes go flying off. Other times the girls would tease them and want to play kiss chase, They would run and giggle and then mysteriously let themselves get caught. Melanie tore off a new piece and wrote a longer note and handed it to him. He read, "Are you sure I can't convince you? They're rather pert." JB had to subtly adjust his seating position and hoped that she did not notice. "Where do I go from here?" thought JB. He was still thinking, and she tore off another piece, wrote on it and handed it to him. He looked, and she'd written, 1-0 to me, I think.
"So, as a last reminder," said Camo, "you must never break the fell running code. What should you not do?" "Break the fell running code," said everyone in the audience robotically.
"What's the fell running code?" said JB to Melanie. "I don't know," she said. "I wasn't listening. Go up and ask him."
"No chance. You ask him,"
he said.
"No way. You do it,"
she said. Yorkshire appeared at JB's shoulder.
"What's all this then? Passing little notes?"
he said out loud for everyone to hear. Camo stopped speaking and everyone turned around to look at JB.
"No,"
he said, trying not to think of the notes in his hand.
"Yes, you are,"
said Yorkshire.
"No, I'm not,"
said JB.
"I'm not blind. I saw you perfectly well,"
said Yorkshire.
"And if you are not writing notes, you won't mind showing me what's in your hand then, will you?"
No, said JB. Yorkshire smiled, thinking he had him trapped. JB opened his hand to show him there was nothing there.
"Very funny,"
scoffed Yorkshire.
"The other hand. I know it's a note you've been passing, Melanie. I'm sure we're all interested in sharing the joke, aren't we, everyone?"
"Yeah," said the other runners, and they leaned in for a closer look. Melanie had her hand up to her face and was bent in on herself, as if trying to hide. "What do I do?" thought JB. "I can't show him these." JB held his hand up, and everyone except Melanie craned forward. In a flash, JB stuffed the notes in his mouth and started to chew. There was an intake of breath and then laughter.
"Very mature,"
said Yorkshire, disappointed. Then everyone saw a single piece of paper caught in a beam of dusty light. When JB had gone to put them in his mouth, one part must have escaped. It was now twisting and spinning like a falling seed, trying to get distance from a tree. There was an intake of breath. JB snatched for it, but the wind from his closing palm pushed it further away, and it gently descended at Yorkshire's feet.
"Well, well, well, look what Providence has provided," he said, picking it up. "Let's see what we have here then, shall we?"
Everyone went silent and leaned in even closer. All the possibilities raced through JB's mind, and he prayed. Melanie shrank further and deeper into her chair. Yorkshire read the note and looked up, puzzled.
"Pert?"
he said. Melanie let out a squeal of laughter.
"Very funny, I'm sure," said Yorkshire. "Something infantile, no doubt."
JB thought quickly.
I wrote this talk was expert,"
he said, keeping a straight face.
"It must have got torn off at the X."
Yorkshire looked at the note again.
"But it's got a capital P," he said, confused.
"I'm sure they have,"
said JB. Melanie burst out laughing and coughing.
I'm sorry, she said. I've got a drink in the car. I think I'll go and get it.
She ran out of the room, trying not to laugh. I'd better go and see she's all right, said JB, getting up and going after her.
It's okay, said Yorkshire. We're finishing now anyway. I'll have to add something about passing notes in class to the code.
JB went outside to the car park. By chance, Melanie's car was next to his. She was stood at the door, drinking from a juice bottle. He walked across.
I was mortified when that note landed at his feet, she said. I suppose it could have been worse. Imagine if it was that one, she said.
I bet you say it to all the boys, smiled JB.
No,
she said, a little put out.
I don't.
Of course, he said. She stopped drinking and held his eye.
No, I don't,
she said seriously.
I'm really quite shy.
I know, he said. I was joking. It's just a saying.
No, really, she carried on. If I'm in a group, I end up not talking and drifting off into my own thoughts instead. People must think I'm a bitch, but I'm not. I'm definitely not a bitch. I hate bitches. I'm just shy.
People don't think you're a bitch. They think you're an ice queen, he said, smiling.
Oh, brilliant, she said. An ice queen, eh?
They were quiet for a moment. Oh, hang on, he said. He opened his car and went into the glove compartment. He handed her a large Toblerone. She took it laughing.
I thought you only had a sneaky peek, only a Kit Kat's worth, you said.
I lied, he said, laughing. She laughed again and went a little red. She put it in her car. Well, that was an experience, he said, nodding at the hall.
Yes, she said. I hope they calm down. That was all a bit too much. We never did figure out what the fell running code was.
No, laughed JB. What belt are you? I mean, what colour neck gaiter? What colour buff?
What are you on about? She said.
You missed that as well? He said, surprised. You have to wear a colour buff that matches your level.
That's funny, she said. I normally wear one that matches my eyes.
He could not help looking at her eyes, and she smiled at him.
Well,
she said, looking at her watch.
All this time out and 0 miles done. What kind of fell running club is that?
JB thought a moment. Do you fancy going for a quick run?
What? What now? She said.
I've got something to show you,
he said. She raised a quizzical eyebrow.
He laughed. A little local run, I've found, that's all.
She thought a moment. How far?
Probably about 7-8 miles there and back, he said. Just jump miles on the flat though, no hills.
She looked at her watch. Okay, she said doubtfully. That could work.
Good, he said, locking up his car.
Where are we going? She said, becoming a little shy.
I've got something to show you. Trust me, he said.
I never trust anyone who says trust me, she said.
Come to think of it, said JB, neither do I.
Ha ha, she laughed.
They ran down the road and then up onto the bank of a picturesque canal with pretty canal barges and little white boats.
This is nice, she said.
Further down the canal, they turned off to a high hedge-lined path. The hedges either side were overgrown, and narrowed the path further. The path became muddy and turned left to pass alongside a railway line. Then there was a dark brick railway arch. It was the one ugly point of the run, with an oily puddles underneath.
"It was quite pretty by the canal, but this isn't so nice," she said. "You're not a serial killer, are you?"
"Only on the weekends," he said, laughing.
"Ha ha."
She laughed and watched her footing to avoid her training shoes going into the black oily puddles. "Anyway, you can outrun me," he said. "It gets nicer a bit further down." They came to a big stile, or gate.
"Oh, you brought me to a kissing gate,"
she said, smiling coyly. "A what?" he said.
"A kissing gate,"
she said, teasing.
"So that's your game."
"No," he protested. "I've never heard 'em called that before." She gave him a coy look. "Honest," he said, going through the gate. She followed behind, smiling at him. "What?" he said. She shrugged. They crossed over a rarely used railway line and went through the gate on the other side. He gave her a look. "A kissing gate, eh? I've never heard 'em call that before." "Well, now I know," he said.
"Now you know,"
she said, coyly. They were in a very narrow walkway between two fences, with a golf course through the fence on the right and the train line high up on the left. They had to go single file. JB was first. Ahead was a dog walker. She pulled into the side and pulled the dog close to her to let them pass.
"Don't mind her,"
said the dog owner.
"She doesn't bite."
"I'm more worried for you," said JB back. "Because she does." He nodded back at Melanie.
"Oi!"
shouted Melanie. The dog owner laughed. There was a nice little wooden bridge over a small trickling stream at the edge of the golf course. They turned right and left the train line behind. To the right was the golf course. To their left was a field filled with wild meadow flowers, and a good-looking brown horse eating the grass.
"Oh, it's back to being beautiful again,"
said Melanie. JB smiled to himself, knowing what was ahead. The path turned left, and trees either side became thicker. Ahead, the trees joined together and crowded overhead, and the pathway became a beautiful round wooden tunnel. As they ran on, it became more and more beautiful. The birds sang. The sunlight broke through the canopy in sunbeams, and the air around them became still. Just ahead, the path floor was littered with wild apples. All the walkers had kindly stuck to a thin narrow path to one side, so as not to spoil the carpet of wild apples.
"Oh, wow,"
said Melanie, slowing to a stop. "The apple tree tunnel," said JB.
"This is really beautiful. I can see why you come here,"
she said, her face artless and with a look of wonder. She was looking around, taking it all in.
"Will you take a couple of pictures for me?"
she said, taking her little running rucksack off. "Sure," said JB. She got her phone out, turned it on, and told him what to press. She stood in the middle of the track, framed in the centre of the circle. JB looked at her through the phone and took a couple of pictures. She was unsettlingly beautiful. "Jump up," he said. "Do a star jump."
"Good idea,"
she said. He took a few with her in mid-air and passed her the phone back. She took a look.
"Amazing,"
she said. They ran on through a pretty little green open space with a few trees.
"This really is a nice run,"
she said.
"This would be a nice place for a picnic."
"Wait until you see where we're going," he said.
"There's more?"
she said with a coy smile. The best bit, the barrows, he said. It's a couple of miles to it, though.
The barrows? What's the barrows?
She said. You'll just have to wait and see, said JB.
I don't believe you, she said. It can't be better than that apple tunnel. That was so beautiful.
They ran down the promenade until the end of very old, white-painted fishing cottages. In the centre they turned up a small headland hill. Near the top there was a pretty old stone church, and he stopped. See that Celtic cross? He said. There was a stone Celtic cross in the churchyard. Behind the church could be seen a part view of the bay.
Nice, she said, unsure.
Is that it?
Is that why you brought me all the way here?
Not quite, he said. Up here is the barrows. They went further up the hill, and there was a tiny, ruined limestone church.
Oh, that's nice, she said. That must be old.
He nodded for her to follow him up. They climbed a short set of very worn stone steps up to the top point of the headland.
God, what an amazing view of the bay, she said, coming up. And you can see all the fells in the Lake District too.
He waited a moment for her to see it and her reaction.
What's that?
She shouted, grabbing hold of his arm. The ground in front was a large slab of stone, and in it, at their feet, were hewn out weathered human shapes, about 1.5 feet deep. Those are the cut graves, the barrows, Viking graves, they think. Kind of, he said. When I first saw them and was told they were Viking graves, I thought there must be a stone lid missing that had broken and disappeared over the centuries, but apparently not. Apparently they used to lie the bodies out in these, and believed that when the seagulls and crows came down and pecked out their eyes and ate their flesh, it took their souls up to Valhalla, where they lived forever.
That's not the way I want to go, she said, pulling a face. Gory, but these are amazing. What a place for it. What a view. It must have been such a sacred place for them.
Yeah, said JB. That's what I thought, yeah. They both took in the view from the headland out across the big open bay, looking left and right to take it all in, the fresh air and the atmosphere of the place. Imagine those Vikings and all the other people that have come here over the centuries, he said.
I was just thinking the same, she said.
She looked down at the graves.
There's a place for 6. I think some are for men, women, and oh, that one's for a child, she said.
Yeah, I think so, he said.
Should we? She said, looking at him with wide, bright eyes.
What? He said. Get in.
Should we?
I will if you will.
Let's do it.
And she giggled nervously. She went to the second female-looking grave, and he went to the first, slightly taller male. Nervously, they climbed in and sat there first.
Go on, she said.
You first. Together, he said.
Okay.
They both looked at each other to make sure they did not chicken out, and then lowered themselves down. Gradually, everything disappeared from JB's view, and he was in a Viking grave, looking up at a blue sky, with some slowly passing white clouds. He could see the sandstone edge of the grave, and nothing else. The wind was muffled, and gave a sound a little bit like listening at a seashell. He had an eerie feeling that grew stronger, and he sat up quickly, just as Melanie did too. She was laughing and holding a hand to her heart, and she seemed very young and girl-like. They both got out quickly. "Ugh," she said, shivering. She shook her arms and danced her shoulders about, as if trying to shake something off. "That was so creepy. Ugh," she laughed. "Do you want me to take a picture of you in one?" he said.
"Oh, good God, no," she said. "That will be too real. I'll take a picture of the empty graves, though."
While she took the picture, he went further out onto the headland. "Come on, you get a better view of the bay and the lakes just up here," he said. They moved past the graves to a grassy part of the hill. She looked all around and took it all in. There was a breeze, and she took her hairband off and ran her fingers through her hair to let the wind through it and dry it. They were quiet, but it was not awkward. Eventually she shivered with the wind. "We'd better get going," said JB. "You don't want to get cold and stiff for the run back."
"Or do we have to?" she said. "It's so beautiful, I could stay all day. It's a magical place."
"It is nice," he said. "I forget it's here. I should come more often." She looked him directly in the eye, the wind blowing her hair.
"Thank you for bringing me here and sharing it with me," she said, openly.
"You're welcome," he said, trying not to show any effect from her beauty. They hardly spoke on the way back down the prom, just smiled and laughed. When they got back, theirs were the only two cars still in the car park. Everyone else had gone. JB thought she would leave quickly with her drive, but she leaned against her car, perched on the side of the bonnet. He did the same on his car opposite her, and tried to look nonchalant.
"Well, thank you for one of my favourite ever runs. It might even be better than the Cross Bay run," she said. "You are full of surprises, Jam Butty."
"Yeah," he said, being cool, thinking she might be being sarcastic. "Viking graves. I know how to show a girl a good time."
"No," she said seriously. "That was magical, actually."
"Yeah," said JB. "Those Viking graves are special."
"And the company too," she said, smiling.
He looked down at the ground shyly for a moment. When he looked back up, he thought she was going to say 1-0 for the game, but she was just combing her hair and smiling. She leaned on her car, her ankles crossed, not hurrying to leave. JB leaned on his car, trying to look cool and relaxed. No one spoke, and there was a tension.
"What am I going to do with you?" she said. "How did we start that silly game?"
"I don't know," he said. "It's just a game." She looked at him, and it was like a cloud went over her eyes. He saw it and tried to figure out why. The magic had suddenly gone from the evening.
"For you, is it just about winning?" she said.
"Of course not," he said. "I know you could easily win every time."
"Why do you say that?" she said.
He looked confused. "Well, isn't it obvious? Look at you," he said. "You're gorgeous, and I'm, well, not as much."
"So you don't think it's a little dangerous to play so close to the wire, like tonight?" she said, nodding at the hall.
"Why would it be?" he said. "It wouldn't matter how much I became attracted to you. You wouldn't be attracted to me, so obviously that means it's always perfectly safe."
She was quiet for a moment. "You mean you are relying totally on that?" she said.
"Well, obviously. It's the fail-safe," he said.
She shook her head and sighed. Maybe it's because I'm half French, she said, and spent a lot of my childhood in France, but I don't always understand.
I didn't know that, he said.
Yes, my mother is French. We spent every summer as a child in France. I had a few years of school there from 10 to 13. In the Dordogne. It's beautiful down there. You should go.
You can speak French then?
He said. Of course, I'm bilingual, she said.
He thought of asking her to speak French, but she seemed suddenly fed up. I'm losing her ear, he thought. He could not think of anything else to say, so ended up asking her anyway. Could you say something in French? He said. She looked a little angry at being asked to perform, and for a moment he thought she was going to tell him to get lost or something. Instead, she got up off the car. She started speaking in French while walking towards him, gesticulating with her hands. The French words came out, guttural, passionate, angry even. She was near spitting, coming closer and closer until she was leaning over him, and he was leaning back down over the car. She spoke directly over him, hair around her face, her mouth rounded to get the vowels out, her face blushed, her breath going into his face, her face framed by the sky. She was totally French, and then in an instant her face changed back. She stayed hovering over him, and he was lost. Then she got up and went back to sitting on her car. Was that okay? She said. Yes, said a voice from the back of his throat. He was released from his hypnosis and sat up. She smiled at him. She twisted her hair around, held it, and slipped an elastic band off her wrist to hold it. She plumped the hair out. It was done in a second in a well-practiced way. Okay, I've got to go, she said. Thanks again for the run. That was nice. Okay, he said, still recovering from the sudden French girl. See you next time. She started her engine. She gave him a look with a coy smile. He waved as she drove off. What happened then? Thought JB. She seemed disappointed for some reason. My God, though, when she spoke French, he said out loud.